Do you want me to turn my camera off?
No, you're right. Just leave it. G'day, everyone. Good to have your company. Welcome to the live stream for Lakeside Drive's F1 podcast. The three of us are all here, which is exciting, and on time, which is even more exciting. And we're about to jump into the podcast. It's going to be a little bit more relaxed at the beginning, at the end, so you'll get to hear me intro it, and you'll get to hear us outro it and have a bit of a chat. But we were just saying that Campy's wearing a different RM Williams shirt this time. Why is that, Campy?
Oh, just give them what the fans what they want, showing them I've got a diverse wardrobe.
Good. And you've got a shirt schedule now, is that correct?
Yeah, something like that.
Very, very good. All right. Well, thanks again for joining us. If you're on our YouTube channel, that's where I'll be checking our live comments. John Paul, g'day, and Nick as well. Drink, everyone. Every time someone mentions the footy, geez, we'd be here for a while. And surely it's too early. Surely. All right, boys, let's get into it, shall we?
Nice.
Hello there, my name is James and welcome to another episode of Lakeside Drive's F1 podcast. In this episode, we chat about the Russian Grand Prix in a pre-drinking fashion. And I'm joined, of course, as always, by my friends and yours, the two Thomases, Tommy T and Thomas J. Camp. Lads, how you doing?
Good, mate. How are you?
Very well. Campy, how are you?
Very well, gentlemen. How are we all?
Yes.
And to the live listeners, thank you very much for tuning in on a pleasant Sunday morning.
Yeah, it's great to have your company. Look, thank you to you as well. If you subscribe to us on YouTube, we've just passed 500 subs. It's a big deal for us. I know I keep banging on about this. Look, it costs you nothing, but the whole thing is there's this YouTube advertising partner program. In order to get onto it and to get some revenue, you need 1,000 subscribers. We've hit everything else. We've done heaps of content. We've had heaps of watch hours. It's all very good, but we are on the path, I should say, to 1,000, which is fantastic. So thank you to you,
good.
and to Michael Best, who wrote all this music and messaged Tommy T and I this morning, going, "I don't even know about F1, but I guess you guys deserve a follow."
His story was like, if you like things that go zoom, zoom, follow.
It is very good. Also, if you are watching the live stream and you can't quite hear us, there was some issues with audio. I know on some platforms it's a bit weird. I generally tend to find on my phone we all sound very good. If you're watching on a computer, sometimes it doesn't, and it's mainly Tommy T's fault for that. So he'll apologise profusely in advance. Lads, this we almost got a little scared, didn't we, yesterday about qualifying not happening. There was a potential Spa kind of vibe, wasn't there, going from the FIA, but of course ahead of time we got Jack Doohan and Oscar Piastri at F3 and F2 races as well. Tommy T, what happened with Jack Doohan? What was he doing?
He was doing plenty, is what he was doing. Love that. It's never going to get old, is it?
Never,
No.
never, ever.
This is the last round for F3 as well. So he has won. I think the championship's already over, and he's come second, I think, based on no matter what happens today, as far as I'm aware. Someone can probably correct me. But he's put it on pole in the feature race, which is awesome to see. We were kind of skeptical of young Jack early on, but he's put it together this year, and mean feat to put it on pole. So, yeah, fingers crossed that this is
Did he
the
put it
start.
on? Sorry, did he put it on pole, or did he get pipped on the last little section
so
and went to?
No, there was a timing error. So they used his previous sector 1
Yeah.
faster, but then retroactively they went back and he was the fastest. So he was
Oh, lovely, Mr. Jack Doohan.
Look,
Oh,
unfortunate, wasn't it, that we know, of course, that the F3 title has just been crowned. He was in the running for it ahead of the race, and unfortunately just couldn't get it done. But Tommy T, as you said, he's made significant leaps and bounds, hasn't he, from last year to this year? And of course, the team change has made a big difference with that as well, hasn't it?
Yeah, for sure. He's still so young. I think we always forget how young these guys are. And he was like, I don't know, you can probably shine some more light, Campy. I don't know if he's always been a single seat racer. He's done many other things growing up. He's always been fast. But I mean, him jumping across to this category is kind of, I don't know, a bit new and different. So it's good to see him kind of pick it up, and hopefully there's the future.
Yeah, look, he rode bikes younger as a young kid, obviously, with your dad being a
Yeah,
five-time
That's gonna happen.
500cc world champion. He's always fast in whatever he did, but he made the decision to jump into single-seaters because that's where his passion really lied. Did really well in the F4 Formula European Championship. Got some really good results there. I don't think he won the championship, but he showed a lot of promise. Last year, he stepped into F3 for the first year, and he had a stinker. Like we were really, really cautious last year when we were talking about him not to jump off his bandwagon, but he wasn't performing. But he did a test for his current team at the end of last year, and he went fastest at the test, and everyone just sort of stepped back and went, "Whoa, where did that come from?" So he changed teams this year, and I'll tell you what, it's been 2 different years this year compared to last year. And this year he's been consistently up the front, consistently getting poles. He had a couple of incidents, I think, in round 2 where he just failed to score some points in the sprint races, and that's where the champion, Mr. Hauger, sort of kicked up his lead, and he was never really able to fight back and break up that championship lead that Hauger had. But yeah, he's had a sensational year. I would suggest that he probably goes to F2 next year.
Yep.
I think so.
Depending on how the seats work out, but he wants a good drive too. So, and he will probably want to do some testing in that, test some F2 cars before he gets to it, because I believe we've got some new chassis for next year in line with the Formula One changes as well. So that will be interesting. Look, Piastri's probably our number 1 at the moment because how he's doing at F2. But
How can he not be?
Doohan is definitely one to keep our eyes on too. I mean, we could have 3 Formula One drivers on Australian Formula One drivers
We'd
on
be
the
the
grid.
new BBC, wouldn't we?
Yeah, I was gonna say suddenly people are gonna get sick of us. Oh, you blokes get too bloody excited with all these Australians at the front in the top 2 positions. Too many. Well, can't help
What was
myself.
We
that?
can only hope, can't we?
That was just some, I don't know, a mix of you, Campy, and everybody else in the world. Something to mention as well, boys, around before we talk about Oscar Piastri as well, is that thank goodness F2 and F3 are changing formats to exactly what they did
God.
before this terrible
Before they tried
idea
the
of
crap.
trying to have multi seasons. Both of them are now going to run on F1 weekends, which is fantastic because we saw Oscar
Wow,
Piastri.
What a great idea.
What an understanding. Oscar Piastri basically just didn't race for like 3 months almost in the middle. And of course, with COVID and being an Australian, couldn't get home, trapped overseas, you know, and they're not doing anything else like other series as well, of course, because they need to stay true to the F2 and F3 stuff. But that's good news, I think. And of course, don't forget Callan Williams, who's also an Australian. He's in F3. So, of course, if Jack Doohan moves across to F2, and we don't know what Oscar's going to do yet, of course, we'll chat about him now, shall we? Because certainly there's a lot of hope that he's going to win the F2 championship.
He's going to win 3 on the trot.
Which is great, right? He's also taken 3 poles in a row, and he's in the company of George Russell, Alex Albon, and Charles Leclerc for doing that. The only other F2 drivers to take 3 poles in a row. But of course, we know, lads, that he's not necessarily in line for this. The only seat that's left. We can combine all of these points in one. So let's do that because Haas have confirmed both of their drivers for next year. No real surprises there. I think they were just working out the Ferrari element of the Mick Schumacher contract. And look, Giovinazzi hasn't really performed all that well over the last couple of races. Some points of his fault, some points of not. But it's just heavily rumored now that Guan Yu Zhou is going to be in that Alfa Romeo seat, regardless if he takes victory in F2 or not, which means Oscar Piastri, unfortunately, may be without a drive for next year.
Yep.
I don't like it.
Be something about money walking and stuff.
Money talks, bullshit walks.
There it is.
I think that's a lot to do with that Alpha seat, to be honest.
Not that Piastri is bullshit at all. He's a genuine. I think he's genuine superstar in the making.
Yeah.
If I'm Alfa Romeo, the £30 million a year probably works for them and their budget. They've got a paid driver. They've got Valtteri Bottas next year as well. So, I would love to see Piastri in the seat, but I am not uncomfortable about Joe going to another organisation because it just means Piastri's in the number one spot for the Alpine team as a
Good
junior
point.
driver.
Good point.
And
Yeah.
I've said
As a Renault junior.
Renault. Yeah,
Good
look,
times.
they need to throw a big bone to him if he wins his championship, and he's performing excellently at the moment. I mean, I look at the season, and where Joe is making his points up is in the sprint races because he's not qualifying as well as Oscar Piastri. So I think the sprint races are roughly, they're not half points, but they're like 15 points for a win, 12 for second, and then works its way back down to 10.
Yeah.
And then there's a point for fastest lap as well. But that's where Joe's making his gains on Piastri's in the sprint races because he's not qualifying as well and then getting to pass, he's qualifying that 5th to 6th. And then what he can actually do is get up the grid in the first sprint race, and then the second sprint race he can, pick off a lot of the slower competitors that behind him in the first. But then when full points are on offer, that's where Piastri, gets the 25 points for the win, in that top three. And I think the only mistake he's made was in round 1 this year. Excellent race if you want to go back and watch it somewhere on the archives. He was on the alternative tyre strategy, and he's the only one in the field to make it right. And there was a safety car came out, which meant he lost, the
Just
8 seconds. And when he was fighting for, a podium position, he just got a bit too throttle happy and the rear end stepped out on him. And that's the only mistake he's really made all year. He's had some small ones in some the sprint races last time out at Monza, but they were just on the first lap, cold tyres and getting used to it. But, mate, geez, the kid just performs under pressure, doesn't he?
So good. Yeah.
He definitely deserves that top seat at some point, doesn't he? And we spoke about this in our last podcast, our team radio podcast. And I want to say a bit massive thank you to you for writing in your questions to us. That's still a thing because, of course, there's a gap between the next race as well. So we'll be doing another team radio podcast next week. You can submit your questions via Discord. Link to join that is in the description below, or via Instagram as well, which is really, really great. Also, lads, look what came in the mail for me the other day. My Lakeside Drive t-shirt, some fresh merch. I haven't even taken it out of the packet just before we started recording. But you can grab some merch as well from our store, which helps us as well. All right, lads.
I don't know if I can wear purple.
Well, sometimes you just got to be on brand with the colours, Campy.
You would look like Barney the dinosaur if you were that.
Also, I don't think purple is in the color palette for RM Williams, mate. I'm not sure they'd have that. Right, well, let's talk about the practice sessions, shall we? It was very wet. Luckily, David Munnis was probably preoccupied doing something else at some point and wasn't really talking about the weather ahead of this weekend. But as I said earlier, we had a bit of a scare. The FIA probably a little, I was going to say trigger happy, but not trigger happy as a result of Spa and what happened there. Campy, of course, I think the right decision to cancel FP3, but and lucky really that the range is cleared in time for qualifying, wasn't it?
Yeah, they've been. I mean, I understand, especially the junior formulas as well. I mean, they cancelled one of the races and had one on Friday night for us, which was the Friday morning. So, good decision there. They saw that they had a gap and they had a time frame to get some races in, which worked. Good thing they probably cancelled P3, but I tell you what, this year they've moved into an absolute safety conscious realm that we haven't seen previously. I mean, I know it's dangerous to drive in the wet, but I mean, we've had races in the wet before and people always spin and crash, but it seems to me like visibility is not the answer for the safety. I just don't like that. But in saying that, I'm not sitting in the seat. I'm not responsible for these drivers. I'm just a fan that wants to see cars on track. So I'm glad they ran qualifying last night because it was clearly perfectly fine to run qualifying, and any race in that condition, even if it was raining, still would have been fine to run as well. So look, I think they're a bit trigger happy, as you said, James, but hey, if I was sitting in that chair, I'd probably err on the side of caution more than risk it.
I don't want to. Let me just cross promote another podcast. I spoke with the deputy race director for Formula One, Scott Elkins, who's the race director for Extreme E, and when we spoke on the Extreme E podcast, which is coming out next week, about the whole decision. So I spoke to him just after Spa and ahead of Zandvoort, and his line was very simple. He's like, it's very black and white in this instance. If it's deemed unsafe, then we're not going to do it, regardless. Like, there's no external pressure. There's no this media, like, who's behind closed doors nonsense. None of that. It's just, if we don't feel like it's going to be safe enough, then we don't let it run. And I think that's fair enough, you know. And I mean, Michael Massey is in that seat, so he's, you know, right there for us to have all of the having a crack at. But of course, he's got a big team behind him too. But I think you're right, Campy. Like, especially after we saw, you know, those massive pile-ups through Eau Rouge in the W Series, and even Lando Norris spinning out and qualifying and all that sort of other stuff. You know, and this track, the walls are a lot closer than Spa, aren't they? So we know that to be the case as well.
But in saying that, like, did you ask him about why you decided to classify Spa after running 3 laps under a safety car? Because that to me is the dumbest bloody decision they've ever made. You're awarding half. We never award points for qualifying on a Saturday. And why on earth would you even put the cars out on track if safety is your number one thing behind the safety? It's just, that to me reeks of bullshit, you know?
And look, and I mean, he wasn't there, so I couldn't tell you. But I think you're right, though. Like, if it's just a safety thing, then it's a safety thing. Do we need the classification? Because it's very annoying having 0.5 points for fantasy teams and everything else.
Sick of looking at it.
It just doesn't make sense. And also for Williams to have their first podium like that, like, was happy for them, but they didn't earn it in a race situation. Like, it was a great qualifying lap, and of course we saw George Russell this weekend do a great qualifying lap, but it was all about conditions and right place, right time on the right part of the track. We know that Danny Rick and others would have got past George pretty quickly. So I mean, we've spoken about that, haven't we, in the past? All right, let's talk about qualifying, lads, because it was a bit of an interesting session. We know that Seb was absolutely devastated, wasn't he, that he wasn't able to get through into the next qualifying session. He was running about P5 in one of the free practice sessions, and we know, I mean, Stroll put it in 8th in comparison to his 11th. Do we think that he's still struggling a little bit, Campy, with trying to get to grips with this car, or is just the pace not there still?
No, I just think it's track evolution that while he didn't get into Q3 last night. I think he said his fastest lap, 2 laps, 2 minutes previous to the session finishing, and you know that was a top 5 time for when people were crossing the track at that particular moment. Unfortunately for him, I think he got stuck in some traffic on his last hot lap, which meant his actual lap, which should have been, you know, representative where he's at, got held up by traffic, and you know, but that's motorsport. That's what happens in these conditions. And to miss out like that, you can tell he's deeply frustrated, because he's sitting here going, geez, I've had poor results. One at Monza. Sorry, what was before Monza? Whatever that was. Wasn't his fault. He got taken out from memory, and then Mick Schumacher hit him at Monza, and he's going into 3 races out of 4. You know, just going, what is going on here? Like, why can't I get any good luck? And seem to be, because I think he's got some genuine pace in the car, except for the odd track that they don't. And he's consistently beating Stroll. But, you know, when these things happen, it frustrates him, because he knows he's not going to be in the sport for another 5 or 6 years. It's probably 2 or 3, and he's looking to get the absolute most out of himself. So it's really frustrating to him when these things occur.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it would have been down to those intermediate tyres as well. They were kind of talking on the broadcast that a lot of it is like fast lap, slow lap, and sometimes you're just running fast laps. So each car is different on how they use those intermediates, and that's one of the have the least amount of practice on as well. So the teams don't have enough data to go, okay, cool, at Sochi on the intermediate, this. Like they were talking about going into turn 3. That's such an unknown corner, which is flat out easy in the dry, but you could see them feathering the throttle going, I don't know what this car's going to do going into that with that little G-force. So I think a lot of it was just timing. He just didn't have that last little bit of time up his sleeve to put in that fast lap without traffic, like James said. So it's kind of made it interesting though, and we'll talk about the rest of qualifying, but it's have this kind of like wet weather, intermediate tire kind of stuff thrown in because it's not just who's got the fastest car; it's who's got the biggest cojones to bloody put it around the track in the wet.
Yep.
Yeah, look, you're not wrong. And I mean, obviously, then making that call to go to softs is the big thing as well, which obviously paid off for Lando Norris in the long run. And also, they were really, if Paul di Resta could say "poosh poo" one more time, that would be fantastic. Like, all right, dude, you don't have to say it every bloody sentence. Thanks, groundskeeper di Resta. Hamilton just didn't seem really connected this weekend. We know that out of Monza, he of course had a wheel on his head, and then he went to the Met Gala, and now he's here. So he's had some neck pain, some neck issues. Is that really, interacting with him in the car, Tommy T, do you think? Or is he just making silly little mistakes that are very unusual for him?
I think Max is in his head as well as on top of his head at the previous race. I think Max has got some real estate upstairs for Hamilton, and he's kind of just making stupid mistakes. Okay, Max is down the back. I have to absolutely nail this weekend, get those points back, and then he just bins it like little things into the pits, and he hits the wall. That's a small mistake, and it happens to everyone. We've seen Kimi do that. We've seen Lando do it earlier in the weekend. Then little things like that just gave away all of his opportunity to put in that far, like we just talked on the slick, and also stuffed up Bottas as well because they were double stacked. But just little rookie mistakes that you've never seen from Hamilton in his career until he's going for his 8th title. It's bizarre, very interesting. I think because he hasn't had a fight like this, arguably in his career. Obviously, the Rosberg one was more like a tale of two halves of a season more than anything. Than this is like constant battle between the two of them. I think it's actually kind of not going how he thought it would, maybe.
Yeah, well, and Mercedes, as we know, were focusing at the beginning of the year on the 2022 car, not so much on this car, but when the realization that Red Bull were bringing upgrades every single weekend, we've even heard Hamilton say that, Campy, haven't we, in terms of bringing, these guys are bringing upgrades every single weekend that we can't do. That's throwing him a little, isn't it?
Yeah, I'll put some of it back onto the team, and I think that's where this championship's going to be won. Mercedes as an organisation, as soon as George Russell went to the slicks and said, prep the slicks, and everybody else started going in for slicks, Mercedes missed it by a whole lap.
Yeah.
And that's at this track, that's a 2-minute slow lap to go around again and decide what they're doing. And unfortunately, you don't have that amount of time. They have had that previously because of how quick their car is. But when push comes to shove, Mercedes are leaving points on the track at the moment.
Yep.
Yes, Lewis Hamilton stuffed up, but he's under pressure from. I don't think Max is. Max is in his head, but he knows that car is the fastest car on track this weekend. Whether he qualifies on pole or second to Valtteri, that's where it should be. He knows that he's going to win it. He knows Valtteri will stand aside for him and play rear gunner and play the team game. So there shouldn't be any pressure on him. But Mercedes is creating a pressure by shit strategy, and we've seen that throughout the year. I mean, if you look at Monza, Mercedes away with that race and won by 15 to 20 seconds. This weekend, Mercedes should be dominating that with a 1-2, shoring up their lead in the constructors and getting Hamilton to make a 20-point gain on Max Verstappen for the race. But when they make these decisions, and now they've got to start from 4th or 8th or wherever Bottas is standing because of the indecision in the pits to get them on the slicks, I mean, it's Lewis's fault because he binned it. But again, I mean, you got to get these things right. And
so they
this is where the championship's going to be won.
They interviewed Bono after qualifying, and he said it was because they were on the 2 fast laps with the slowed end in between. And because they went first, they were out of sync with everyone else. So everyone else had finished in time. So it's not an excuse, but he's explaining why they didn't react as quickly. It was because they were on a prep lap ready for the next one. So they were like, do we just bin this prep lap instead of putting in a fast intermediate to kind of chase everyone on those slicks? So that was the thought process. And then they would have had enough time to do 2 fast slick ones if Hamilton hadn't binned it. So you're right, but also you're not fully right. Like, they definitely could have nailed it with 2 slick runs if Lewis hadn't held up both him and Bottas.
I do get it. But if George Russell is saying, let's get on slicks, prep him, that says to me that every driver on the grid and every team should be going, all right, he's going to slicks. What do you think? And they should be asking those questions straight away.
I
And
think
if Lewis didn't, if Lewis said, no, we're going to hold on to this lap, well, then it's his own fault.
Well, because they were prepping, ready with charged batteries, ready to do an intermediate lap. You don't get that back, and like the decision to go into the pits throws away a prep lap, which is completely wasted. And
I understand.
So I get what you're saying as well, but I think it's got to be more Hamilton than that, because the strategy was perfect. If he didn't bin it, they would have got the intermediate, and they would have got 2 slick laps. So
I blame the team. George Russell, he obviously had a pretty good qualifying to put it in third. It was pretty interesting to see him and Norris up the front. As I said, this is going to be the most George Russell thing to happen. Williams is going to advance so far ahead of the grid next year. Alex Albon's going to be floating around that position, and George Russell's going to be around 13th, 14th going, hang on a second, what happened? And we'll all be laughing. But look, Campy, good for Williams, isn't it? Again, this is, like as I said before, it's a slightly on merit qualifying position because, as you said, George made the call. Righto, prep the softs, let's go. Yeah. Here we're going. And Williams have to gamble, don't they, to make up, grid places to get towards the front. Realistically, for George, this is probably better than Spa. This is a real opportunity for him to show how far Williams has come, don't you think?
Oh, I think they'll get swallowed up pretty easily in the first 5 laps. In saying that, what a drive. But he got it right. It was right place, right time. He made the call early, and it was probably a gamble, but he got those 4 laps to warm up the tyres. And they got 3 shots at a fast lap. And those tyres aren't going to burn out when they're going that slow. But he got the temperatures in, and it worked for him. And good on him for doing so. He was really the draw. I mean, that's the performance of qualifying, really, for him to put it on third and to beat Lewis Hamilton. Excellent. But they got it right again. It's a bit like Spa. They were absolutely right place, right time. And is there luck involved? Absolutely. But he was ballsy enough to make the call before anyone else did. And hey, it worked out for them. So congrats to George
I'm going to
Russell.
throw a conspiracy out there. I reckon George had more pace, but he didn't want second on the dirty side. He wanted third to slingshot into first. So he was strategic, and he's just going, you know what, I'm going to go behind my old mate Lando, and I'm going to slingshot past you into the second corner and sail off for a lap until I'm overtaken.
Well, it was interesting that Sainz managed to put it where he did, to be honest, because prior to that, he was nowhere. Both Ferraris were nowhere. Well, obviously, Charles Leclerc starting from the back, so no point. But for Sainz, he was struggling. So good for them to have that. But, I mean, he's not carrying that new engine.
It wasn't a smooth lap, though, was it? He was like wrestling that thing around, and that's like full credit to him. That is a tough thing to do in those conditions with no practice on slicks in those. Like, that's just a good driver doing good things right there. That's very, very tough driving.
Yeah, and I mean, for Carlos, look, we haven't really spoken a lot this year about Ferrari, have we? Because they've been kind of flailing around in the mid-pack, which is not so great for them. I kind of think it means they put their head down and they're sort of focusing, are they, for 2022? Yeah. But in saying that, they have brought an upgrade, Campy, with Charles Leclerc this weekend. It's rumored there's an extra 15 brake horsepower or something ridiculous in that power unit to see what happens. So, of course, Leclerc starting in 19th.
Fuel flow.
Can't be.
Definitely fuel flow.
Yeah, they would have found a new way rather to get around it. But for them, though, this is good. And for Carlos, it's good too, because, after seeing Danny Rick take, the win for McLaren, which he had an ability to do at the same track last year in Carlos Sainz, he would have been feeling a little bit sort of off, I imagine. We know that his race craft is very good. And, I mean, he's up against his old teammate who's got better racecraft this year than last year, that's for sure. So that's going to be an interesting battle. But good for Ferrari, I think. Campy, don't you?
Oh, great result for Carlos. Again, he probably hasn't had the year he wanted to have, but when the opportunity presents itself, where Leclerc starting the back of the grid, he puts it on second. And for Ferrari, I hope they don't have a repeat of Monza where they get swallowed up after a restart really quickly. I mean, where do you go back from second to sixth in about 3 laps? on a track where you shouldn't. It's really difficult to pass. So hopefully for Carlos, he gets a good start and he gets. I hope he jumps Lando, if I'm honest, and that'll slow the pack up a bit. And,
Yeah.
but great for Ferrari. I mean, Ferrari haven't been coming out saying, "Oh, this is the engine that'll get us into a race-winning position," but they've obviously worked hard behind closed doors, and good for them. That's their last upgrade for the remainder of the 7 races, I believe. So, good for them. I think everything's sort of focused on 2022 for now for them.
Yep.
And, yeah, I think it'd be great for Carlos to get a podium. Do I think the race pace is in the car? Not really. I don't. I just think they'll get swallowed up. I think we'll see both Mercedes and both Red Bulls in the top 5. If I'm honest.
You reckon Max is going that whole way? We'll get to that later.
We'll get to Max in a bit. But
Yeah, I think he will. But anyway, that's besides the point. Great result for Carlos and Ferrari.
Yeah, he needs it. As I said, Tommy T,
Yep.
he needs it, doesn't he? Especially after
Big
last
time.
weekend, that 1-2 McLaren, he's looking at that seat going, "Oh, did I make the right decision?"
Yeah,
but if we look at his race pace compared to Leclerc in the past couple of races, he's really been nowhere. It was only a couple of races ago. What was before Monza?
Zandvoort.
Zandvoort. I mean, he lost 20 seconds to Leclerc over a race distance, and we were scratching our heads, going, "Where does that come from?"
We were wondering if it was something to do with that crash that he had in qualifying. Potentially.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. There's all those little things that go on, but Monza, he got beaten by Leclerc too. So this is a good one. It'll do a lot for his confidence.
Yeah, but good Tommy T, isn't it, for him? Do you think,
for sure,
in comparison to what Leclerc can do, or if we see some significant pace from him tomorrow, then maybe he'll be happier knowing that power unit's coming his way soon too?
Exactly. I mean, he's probably not going to like the grid drop, but I think he'll be happy with the power upgrade, which would be nice. It's really interesting to see Sainz and Leclerc as a comparison. This is the worst sport ever to try and compare who's actually the best, because everyone's using different machines. They've only got a teammate to compare against, but it's actually kind of put them both in a good light. I think we actually now appreciate how good Leclerc is now that he's doing it against Carlos, and vice versa. Carlos is actually getting results in a brand new car. So I think he'd be okay with this season. I think he's going to want results next year big time. I think if he can get a podium for this year, I think he'd be happy. Moving to Ferrari first year, that'd be good, but I don't think you can complain. I think he's probably the one that settled in the most in his new team. We still to see the rest of the season. It's pretty hard to deny a bloody win at McLaren for Daniel, but he'd say he's still not comfortable. So interesting.
Yeah, it's good. Well, let's talk about McLaren and Daniel and Lando, of course, because unfortunately, I suppose this this race, it's a bit of a shame that Lando's taken pole position, but when we look at it objectively from a McLaren point of view, we know Andreas Seidel said at the end, sort of last weekend in between, Monza and this race, that it's good that we got that, but let's get back to focusing on what's important, which is delivering every weekend. And he wasn't confident necessarily that his car would go so well. Campy, I mean, praise for you again for saying that this was going to be a McLaren track. In terms of qualifying, though, Lando has been better than Daniel, and there was a little bit of love at the end of the car. At the end next to the car. Danny,
that's your one at the end of the car.
At the end of the car, there it is. The best at the end of the car. The best on the grid at the end of the car. It was good, but Daniel engaged with him, didn't he?
Yeah.
Which was just great news. But for McLaren as a whole, Tommy T, this is good, and good for Lando to put it on pole.
They are I think they are what we've seen Mercedes over the last, decade it seems. They are just regimented, they're slick operation. I think Andreas Seidel is unbelievably organised and structured as a manager of that organisation, and they're doing everything right, incremental improvement constantly, and they're just ticking off box. Look at this, go from a win to a pole. For that young driver in these conditions, they're just making great decisions as a team and for individual drivers as well. So they're pretty hard to fault at the moment, aren't they? I'm happy. Lando had a ripper lap. Yeah. He was kind of robbed somewhat at Spa when he spun off because he was the first one to go out and push on those really wet conditions. But we know he was the bloody fastest around through practice and qualifying, and he probably would have got close to pole there.
Yes.
So it's good to see him kind of get something, because it would have been tough for him to swallow that first win, basically
Yep.
growing up in McLaren,
Yep.
not being him. So I think this is kind of a nice consolation. But also I think it's good that he did win. It's kind of maybe humbled him a bit to, no, this isn't all about you. This is about you and Daniel and McLaren. Neither of you are bigger than McLaren. This is a team sport. And I think it's kind of good that he didn't actually get, so he can't just be the bratty little child that won and
Yeah.
have it all his way.
But there's potential for him, Campy, to actually take victory here, because we know that he can hold Mercedes and Red Bulls behind him. We saw Danny Rick holding a Red Bull of Max Verstappen up, and we've seen, Lando a couple of times now hold Lewis Hamilton up, and he's really the biggest threat, of course, behind. You've got Sainz, Russell, and then Hamilton, then Danny Rick and Alonso. So he's the biggest threat for taking that win. Do you reckon he can hold that?
I think possibly they can. I just think over a race distance, Mercedes is so far ahead of everybody else, and Lewis, Lewis can make passes on track that no one else can. He's still that good, so I think he can win it. I think a lot's got to go his way in order to do so.
Yep.
But congratulations to him. I know we ragged on him a bit last week, and I'm trying to build up this rivalry, but he's driving exceptionally well. Everything went right for him. He got his tyres in the operating zone. When he encountered traffic on his warm-up lap, the cars stepped right off the racing line, whereas where Danny Rick was following, 4 seconds behind him, the three cars they had to pass on the outlap were all into big braking turns, and it compromised Danny Rick's braking on the way in. So yes, Lando warmed the tyres up and got him by 2 seconds, but that's the difference, right, between passing cars in optimum positions on your warm-up lap and not. So, I mean, I'm looking at the track map in qualifying for when they're doing their warm-up laps. I'm going, you got to be joking. Can Danny Rick just get a break? Literally three cars. I think it was Ocon, Stroll, and somebody else that they had to pass, all into big braking turns where you generate most of your heat. So I think he's compromised there. For Danny Rick to put it on fifth, I mean, what a drive. Considering where he's been with that car all weekend.
For sure.
I mean, got P1 and they were doing some long run setups, and then P2 lost it. P3 got cancelled, straight into the car, new motor, new setup. It's been on the back foot all weekend. I'll take P5 at any time. I think he'd be frustrated because he would have known, P2 and P3 were realistically there. And for him, looking at the gap between him and Lando, 2 seconds. But, hey, that's the difference when you encounter traffic on your warm-up laps and in optimum positions and when you don't. So he'll be quietly confident tonight. I think he needs to get a start. I think the first thing they need to do is dispatch of George Russell on the opening lap, and then if they can get Carlos, and then Danny Rick can just hold on to Hamilton for the whole race. You never know what's going to happen with tyres. Lando's under a lot of pressure tonight.
You could see in his interview afterwards, he didn't want to be starting first. He's like, this is the one place you don't want to be starting first. He's like nervous as.
Exactly. So I think he'll get swamped off the start by somebody. And look, Danny Rick, we've seen some of the starts he's made lately. Wouldn't surprise me if he makes up 2 or 3 positions and gets to go.
Exactly, but I think
I'm quietly confident.
This McLaren, look, I get your point about Lando, and that he's going to be feeling a little bit nervous, but the way that this car puts down traction, and again, I think Monza was the best example of that coming through the first chicane. Coming out of that was incredible to watch. Sochi is one of those tracks where you need consistent ability, especially with all the off camber and everything else and the weird corners that they've got.
Especially sector 3,
Absolutely, to put it down. So if Lando can have the similar kind of start to Danny Rick had last weekend. And look, if Lando wins this and Danny Rick gets a podium, I'm going to be bloody stoked because, again, it means McLaren have backed it up, have gone double header for a victory and, potentially P2 for Daniel. We just don't know what Hamilton's going to do. I mean, he's in the prime seat, isn't he? We've got Sainz, as I said, Russell, Hamilton ahead of him. But we know DR's racecraft is good. We're not totally sure on the conditions yet. I think it's going to be dry tonight for the race rather than wet. So free tyre choice, that's going to help a lot or hinder a lot depending on where we get to. We'll talk about what to watch for in the race in a little bit. The last person I want to mention in qualifying is Pierre Gasly. He was just a very, very unhappy boy, Tommy T.
Grumpy boy.
Lots of smashing of wheel going on in car.
He's very grumpy, wasn't he? Nothing went his way, did it? I think he probably knew he had way better. He definitely should have got to Q3, and he knows that he's better than that. I think he got some traffic, but to be honest, when I watched the footage, it didn't look that bad. He thought he got blocked in some way, but it was kind of nothing really to complain about.
Yeah.
I think disappointing because you would have thought Yuki would have done a lot better as well. So disappointing all around for
12 and 13th for AlphaTauri. And Gasly frustrated more that they didn't put new set of slicks straight on, where they could, new set of inters on when everyone else was doing it, and he was left out, on an old set, which was no good for him. He did mention in the press conference afterwards that George was kind of there, but that's not the point. It wasn't that he was being held up. That frustration, but it was more the team's strategy that he was not happy with.
Right.
So he needs to go full Seb Vettel at Ferrari and Carlos Sainz currently at Ferrari and just set your own strategy, don't you? Well, the starting grid is as follows: Lando Norris on first, Carlos Sainz second, Russell third, Hamilton fourth, Danny Rick fifth, Alonso sixth. That's a great drive by Fernando. Very, very happy to see him. We know that he's a great fighter, don't we? And in that sixth position with Danny Rick ahead of him and Valtteri Bottas behind him, it's going to be interesting. Bottas had some really good moments, and then, as we spoke about, because of the bundling with Lewis Hamilton's front wing and the warm-up laps and trying to get in the push-pulls, all that sort of other stuff, unfortunate for him, he's never started outside the top four since his time with Mercedes.
To get past Alonso.
I agree, which is no good because we said that we wanted VB to at least have his last Russian victory, didn't we? Although we still don't know what's going to happen. Lance Stroll had a pretty decent race. Campy, that's his 1 in 25, I think.
Yeah.
Sorry, qualifying, I should say, not race. And he's on to potentially have a decent race.
Yeah, he's got a history of doing well in these conditions.
Yeah, in these mixed conditions. Sergio Perez was doing pretty well in the first bits of qualifying and then was nowhere to be seen. 9th for him. Not as strong as we would have hoped for, especially with Max down at the very back of the pack. I don't think they're totally stoked. Campy, you mentioned this in a podcast a couple of weeks ago, that they maybe have signed him to try and have that consistency for next year, but his performance just hasn't been there, has it?
Done the opposite.
Yeah, look, I think we need to seriously start having the same conversation. I'm having it. I've been having it for about a month now about his performances and where he's at. I just don't think he's cutting it against Max Verstappen.
Yeah.
He's not doing what Red Bull want him to do, and they employed him to be a rear gunner, and he hasn't been that at all. His qualifying is comparable to Albon and Gasly. His race pace is better than those two, and he's had some good results this year. But does it warrant that second seat in that car? Absolutely not.
Yeah, interesting vibes. We can talk about Red Bull for days, can't we? Ocon in 10th, again, a big distance behind Fernando Alonso. So this is where the experience comes out, doesn't it, lads, with Alonso pushing it a lot further towards the front. Seb Vettel in 11th, as we know, he was very frustrated. Gasly, Tsunoda, 12th, 13th. Kimi Raikkonen back, 14th for him. Mick Schumacher in 15th, outperforming Giovinazzi in 16th. Mazepin in 17th. And then Latifi had to take a new power unit, so he went to the back. Leclerc, new power unit. He went to the back. Verstappen, new power unit. He starts at the very back in 20th.
Can I mention Latifi? Jeez,
Please do.
He was on track to out-qualify his teammate.
Yep, he was.
Had some genuine pace in that car, but apparently they found a pneumatic issue in there, which I believe has got to do with the hydraulic somewhere. He'd be spewing, but they found the problem just before qualifying, and they wanted to go out to ensure that they were out in front of Leclerc, so they were going to see what Leclerc was going to do. So, hence why they made the decision not to run a time in Q2. So.
Yep. But he's been performing well, Tommy T, don't you think?
Great,
Since the Williams coming back towards the front, and I think with Spa was good for their awareness, at least. Not that I think they necessarily deserve the points there, but for him to be in that team for next year, I think is the right call. You know, he's not in my yes, he brings money to the team, but he's not traditional pay driver in my mind now. Is certainly not as bad as a Mazepin or Stroll. In poor machinery, he is performing well. And really, genuinely, I hope for his sake at least, and Alex Albon's sake, that Williams next year have a good time, because it'd be a good comparison for him and Albon to be side by side in good machinery. I think we know that George Russell is a pretty solid driver. As Campy said many, many times, we're yet to see his true form up against the like of someone like Lewis Hamilton. But Nicky, big fan, our favourite Canadian. So definitely here for that. All right, let's talk about what we're going to watch for in the race. Now, Tommy T, Max Verstappen to charge through the pack. You said, are you interested? Do you think he's going to get all the way towards the front? We've seen, we saw Valtteri, didn't we, in Monza, go from the back to third. So we know podiums are possible from the back, don't we?
Campy, would you reckon that this is easier or harder to pass than Monza?
Easier.
Yeah, so that's what I would have thought too. I think,
and just going on racing history too.
For sure. I think Max is on here. I think he's going to pick a strategy that works for him as well. I don't know. Maybe that's a two-stopper.
No, it's a one-stopper because there's no degradation on this track.
This is true. Yeah.
I think what will happen is Verstappen will go really long on hards, and he will make, just because of the sheer pace of the car, he will make up positions while others are making pit stops if they opt to go on the medium or the soft tyre in the first stint. So he'll make up positions passing, and he'll make them off in the just strategies and stuff as well. And he will pit and come out in 7th or 8th with 20 laps to go on the soft while everyone's, managing tyres and doing stuff. And I think that's where he'll gain his advantage on the soft tyre last, 20 laps or so, and he'll just come through the field and make some blistering passes.
And we know that he is amazing at passes, don't we? That's going to be interesting to see. But also, I think his battle with Leclerc initially is going to be interesting. So, I mean, we know he's an epic starter. He's potentially going to get past Charles very quickly. But if he doesn't, and we see Ferrari's new power unit, this is going to be a good time for us to have a bit of a comparison about what Ferrari has brought to what I still think is the best car on the grid in the Red Bull. So that'd be good data for Mattia and the team, which is good, I think. VB, look, he starts in 7th. I want him to win this race a little bit. I'm kind of happy for the same podium at Monza. I'm happy for him to win and, Daniel and Lando to get 2nd and 3rd in whatever order. To be honest, I think maybe Lando deserves the 2nd over Daniel because of the qualifying lap that he's had. But what can we honestly see from him, Campy, do you think? As I said, he starts behind Ricciardo and Hamilton. I think he's going to be able to get past Sainz and Russell when those two do. Is he on for a podium, or is he going to be around that 4th, 5th position?
1-2, Mark. I think Merck will go 1-2 tonight.
Cool. Tommy T,
their pace is so far, drastically faster than anyone else. And over a race distance, I just can't see anyone holding them up.
I think Bottas would have put it on pole if he didn't get stooged in qualifying, to be honest. I think this guy is unbelievable there. He was showing his pace as well, and he hadn't given everything. He was still just cruising through. He looks so comfortable. Yep. Where other people are sketchy going through corners, this guy has so much control. He looks so stable through all these off-camber stuff. So I'd back him in. The only issue I think he's got is going to be clearing Alonso, Ricciardo, Hamilton early. The other two I'm not too worried about, but he's got to do that work early so he's not wasting laps and tyres kind of just... Because Alonso's not going to give up that position. I think he has to take him on the start, to be honest.
Yeah, but his play again... long play, right? Everyone starts on.
Yeah,
he'll just go long. Merck will be happy for Bottas and Hamilton last 10 to 15 laps, and where they lose out going long on the hards, they make up drastically by gaining the advantage on the softs in the last 15 to 20 laps.
I think that this is going to be an interesting Sochi, don't you, boys? It's not going to be... Tahir on YouTube live streams asked, do you think Sochi will be boring, although we have a mixed grid? I think it's going to actually be genuinely interesting this time around because, if Merck get out in front for qualifying, yes, we've seen them drive off into the summer, But for this instance, I think it's good. It's good to have these mixed qualifying conditions because it throws a whole lot of jeopardy, as Tommy T would say, into the mix, and we're here for that. I think that's really good. I put up an Instagram poll to see where people thought Danny Rick was going to come. Some people said first. Love your optimism. I think that's fantastic. But I think realistically, the majority of the responses was third. So for a podium, I think for this race tonight, Tommy T, don't you?
Yep, I think so. I think that's well within the realm. Yeah, he's going to have the right strategy, like Campy's outlined. So, be interesting to see what start Tyler is, because we're not going to know until those tire blankets come off the formation lap, and everyone's like, "Oh shit, everyone's gone hards, or everyone's gone softs." You just don't know where you're going to sit. So, I think if they work in conjunction with what Lando's doing, and they can do a strategy that works for both, where they can actually help each other, is going to be the best strategy, to be honest, not just individual.
What do you think, Campy? Do you mediums, because we know Tyre Deg's not as full on at Sochi? Do you go mediums and then draw it as long as possible onto softs, or are you hard all the way through to the last kind of quarter for be able to switch to softs?
I think the options.
Yep.
Give medium hard, probably that's the safest way, but hard soft again will a lot of time. But I think if you're Danny Rick, you start on the mediums.
Yep.
Because they're not the problem with starting on softs up front is you're not going to be able to get the gap to the teams behind you to pit and get out in front of them unless they pit before you. And I think for the teams behind, they're all going to be going hards or mediums to start. So I think Danny Rick and Lando are going to have to go be aggressive. Someone like Alonso, hey, jump on the softs, get a start.
Yeah, or a Stroll. I reckon he could be a soft.
Then try and dictate the race from the front, which I don't think anyone in that top five other than Hamilton has got the speed to be able to dictate the front. So it wouldn't surprise me if Hamilton starts on softs either. But he's got to get the job done in the first 5 laps, get out in front, and then he can get the gaps he needs. Go 3 or 4 laps longer than everybody else, get on the hard and go to the end. But look, as to the question, I think we've never seen this at Russia before. Russia as a race and qualifying has been pretty predictable up until now. That's been a Mercedes. I think Ferrari won a couple of times. And if you look at the grid position starting wise in the last few years, it's 2x2x2. That's how much of a procession this race has been. Tonight, we got qualifying mixed conditions. Mixes up the whole grid, shakes it up. Grid penalties to key drivers starting at the back. So, look, very, very keen for this race tonight. I don't think it's going to be a ball fest. I would hope that all the action doesn't in the first 5 to 6 laps, and then the last 10 massive, 40 lap lull. What we'll see small game first lap, and then it consistently changing right throughout the middle section race. Ricardo makes a couple of moves, Lando loses a couple, Carlos goes into whatever that looks like. It's going to be a pretty consistent change throughout the whole race, which will be good.
Do you think that Lando does get a good start and Danny Rick just tries to tuck in behind him? Because we know that, that there's going to be some crossover between Sainz and trying to cover off Russell's trying to cover off Hamilton. So DR could potentially just sort of sneak his way, because he's obviously on that clean side of the track, isn't he, Campy? Does he sneak his way and then tuck in and sort of draft behind? Because, again, we know that if McLaren gets out front, they have the ability to dictate the race. And if DR then is the rear gunner like Lando was for him in Monza, that's not a bad situation for McLaren. McLaren are great strategists. We've seen that in Monza as well. That was a really good team performance all round. So, look, I mean, obviously we're McLaren biased now, aren't we? And Danny Rick biased for sure. But it'll be interesting to see Hamilton's tyre choice, Campy. I think you're onto something there. If he does go softs, then there'll be something to watch for. But certainly for DR, mediums is good. Alonso, where do we think he can put it? Because as we've said before, he's great at fighting. He's got some interesting cars around him. Campy, what do you think?
And turn 3 is in the front or braking big inside and gets into the lead. That's nice
Well, absolutely.
He's that good, but then again, he could be shit and be in 10th, 11th. He's the wild
I
card.
just don't trust that car's race pace, to be honest. I think he
No,
could get to
not
the
at
front,
all.
but then he'd slowly slip, wouldn't he?
Yeah, absolutely.
He's probably on for like an 8th or a 9th, to be honest.
He's the wild
George
card,
Russell.
though. He can do things that no one else can do.
Absolutely. George Russell, where do we think Tommy T is really going to be? He's going to finish in the points? In the 11th.
I'm back.
Kevy?
Oh, yeah, no points. No points.
Well, let's see what happens. I mean, I kind of hope that he does have a little bit of race pace and the car goes well. I mean, we can only see, right? There's we can only watch what happens in the race, can't we? Well,
Yep.
boys, that's the pre-drinks pod. Thanks very much to you, and thank you to you for watching, for listening, wherever you're watching. But for our YouTube live stream, a massive thank you to you. Don't forget to jump across to our Discord server, because we talk all the way through the race over heaps of comments. There's heaps of people there, which is fantastic. We really love it. Don't forget to update your fantasy team names. You might be in the winning to win some merch like this at the end of the year. Jump across to our Instagram too. As I said, I'm asking a couple of questions and polls. You can provide some feedback. And again, if you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to subscribe. Well, that's it, boys. I really hope we can see a McLaren double podium again here at Sochi. Looking forward to Monday at 5:30. We will be PM, Australian Eastern Standard Time. We will be live streaming this podcast. So we will see you then.
Love that.
Boys, thanks very much.
See you, boys.
Cheers.
And thanks to you for watching on live stream. To everyone, thank you. Yes, good D's. FL91, that's good. John Paul, welcome. Thank you very much for being here. Billy Four Eyes, of course. Great to have you. Nick, Forklifts on Eau Rouge, great stuff. To everyone who jumped across here, really appreciate it. Thank you, guys. A lot of you are in the Discord as well, as we know that. So it's great to have you here watching us record this episode. As I said, don't forget, 5:30 p.m. tomorrow, Australian Eastern Standard Time. You'll be able to watch us do this again. We'll see you then. Thanks, boys.